What's up everybody, Jay here bringing you a video about the EVGA Z97 Classified. Now why the heck would I even be interested in a Z97 motherboard? Well, that's because when I was recently in Paterson, New Jersey and New York City for business, I went ahead and decided to pick myself up a 4790K i7 processor, which is what you guys know we've been waiting on for my personal rig update. So without further ado, let's go ahead and take a look at the Z97 Classified here from EVGA. Now with this, it comes with all of the features that you would expect with the Z97 Classified or anything that carries the Classified name when it comes to EVGA. But what's cool about this motherboard is they really didn't omit anything. They just kind of went, all right, let's go ahead and cram everything in there that people could possibly want. And they did. Now the Classified has a lot of features on here and we'll just highlight them here on the box. It does support 4th and 5th generation socket 1150 processors. Now as you know, or maybe you don't and you're about to find out, the 4790K is still a 4th generation processor. This is still a Haswell processor, but it is their 4th gen second. They call it a second 4th gen processor. So 5th gen means that the Z97 is going to be 100% compatible with the upcoming Broadwell release. Well, when I say upcoming, I mean it's coming in 2015, but their next processor, their 5th gen processor, or their Broadwell, will be completely compatible with this motherboard. Now it does have an enthusiast, they call it an enthusiast layout, and the reason why they call it that is it supports 2-way plus a physics, 3-way plus a PhysX, 4-way SLI, or Crossfire X. Now if you've been counting, we actually have 5 PCI Express lanes on this motherboard. Now it does have 4 DIMM slots that say 2666 plus, so I guess that means it could handle 3000, I'm assuming, but it has up to 32 gigabyte support, 6 USB 2.0, 6 USB 3.0, 6 native SATA 3, 6 gigabit per second ports, 2 Marvell SW RAID ports, has Intel Smart Response for SSD caching technology if you have an Intel SSD, and it has onboard Creative Sound Core 3 quad-core audio processor. It actually has a built-in quad-core audio processor that is not Realtek. Everybody seems to be going with Realtek on their onboard audio, but this one actually has a Creative Labs or Sound Blaster built into it, which I think is really awesome. It does have the noiseless passive cooling solution, so they ditched the lower fan. Some of these EVGA motherboards had fans on the lower chipset option there for cooling, and it does have support for the Lucid Logics. And I'm not going to talk about Lucid Logics. It's more or less like a software solution when it comes to making your internal graphics card do something on the chip or the processor. I don't really use it, so I'm not going to talk a whole lot about it. Now let's go ahead and talk about the physical properties of the board. It is an eATX, so it's a standard ATX length, but it has about an extra inch of width on there, and that inch could make the difference of this fitting in your case. So you need to make sure your cases are eATX compatible. 5 PCI Express slots, as I mentioned. You do have a 1X PCI Express right there. 6-pin auxiliary power for the PCI Express lanes if you're doing your multi-GPU configurations and you need more power if you're doing high-end overclocking. That massive cooler here on the bottom, which is passive, no fan, so no noise. You do have your 4 DIMM slots up here, 2 8-pin EPS power connectors here for the CPU, so if you're doing LN2 or high-end overclocking, you can get nice clean power. Speaking of clean power, you have an 8-phase VRM setup here with a massive heatsink on there that is connected by a heat pipe to the PLX chip as well as the lower chip here. And you do have right here on the side, it's basically your voltage readout. It has a connector that plugs into there somewhere here. I kind of threw everything on the floor. This is actually the 3rd time I've recorded this video. Camera problems, if you know what I mean. But they plug into there. They've got pigtails that come off of it, and you can use those pigtails to put your voltage meters in without having to actually touch the pins themselves. You have on the side right here an LED readout, which during post will give you trouble codes if something goes wrong with post. And once you're past post, it does turn into a CPU temperature reading, so it's always going to show you your CPU temperature. You have right-angled 24-pin power as well as USB 3.0 plugs. So this, I think, is great. You're not going to have the plugs coming off and making a crazy loop to get behind the motherboard tray. You just have a nice right angle here rather than having to have a funky bend. Now you do have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I see 5 fan slots, so that's more than enough. It looks like only 2 of them, though, are PWM, which is CPU 1 and 2. And then you do have three BIOS right here on the motherboard. There are 3 BIOS chips, and you switch them by using this little toggle right here, this 3-way slider, so that you can play around with the BIOS or upgrade one BIOS, and if something goes bad, it bricks, then you just switch the BIOS and you're up and running. You no longer have to be afraid of doing a BIOS update because it may crash on you or you may lose power. You'll still be up and running. On the bottom down here, you do have color-coded front panel connectors, as well as a built-in speaker. Now this is what I think is awesome. Many motherboards now have a speaker pinout, so you can plug an auxiliary speaker to it and hear your post beeps. This one is built in, and I haven't seen something like this since the early 2000s, because most motherboards now don't put the beep on there, because when you hear your computer turn on and go beep, most people think it's like 1988 all over again. But that's awesome because the beeps are important for troubleshooting. So thank you, EVGA, for putting the speaker on the motherboard. Now guys, this is also featuring their ultra thick like PCB design, so it's very, very heavy. It's one thing to keep in mind too. Now on the back, we do have quite an array of things going on here. As I mentioned, we do have Creative Labs sound right here, 2 mini display ports, a CMOS reset button on the back, as well as right here. You do have 4 USB 3.0, 2 Intel Gigabit Ethernet ports, so you can prioritize your packets by plugging in different routers or different connections to this. And you have 4 USB 2.0 on the back. The Creative also does have a optical output right there. Now they've put more gold material into the socket for a better connection. They've used their they call it POSCAP? I can't remember what they call it. POSCAP capacitors on here. They're square capacitors with the EVGA logos on them. They're all over the motherboard. But everything on here is just built to be very, very high quality and very high end. Now something else I think that's really amazing about this motherboard is the accessories that they give you. They do give you a 2-way SLI bridge, which, I mean, come on, most motherboard manufacturers are doing that these days. So you have your standard black 2-way SLI bridge right there. It's black, it's branded with EVGA. You are also given a hard 3-way SLI bridge. Because it is compatible with 3-way, they go ahead and supply that. And because the spacing on the PCI Express from motherboard to motherboard is not always exactly the same, here's that. So it's a hard one. That's a little PCB built into that. And then they also give you, yeah, you guessed it, a 4-way SLI bridge. That this one doesn't have one of those perforated like tear here thingies. So yeah, a 4-way SLI bridge right there. I mean, look at that. The only thing I don't like about this one is it says primary up here, which, I don't know, they could have maybe made a little marking that said primary maybe in small, where it says primary is kind of ugly. But that just goes right there, and all of your graphics cards, you know, would be linked together. Boing! For your 4-way SLI. I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you've used an EVGA motherboard, let us know what your experiences are down in the comments section. Follow on Twitter if you want to know more about what's happening with Project Skunkworks. I tend to do most of my updates on Twitter and Instagram. It's not going to be a complete build log like Red Mist was because I just don't have the time for that. This is my main system and it can't be down that long. So this is going to be basically build it as fast as I can once I start the project. So there you go, guys. The Z97 from EVGA. Fabulous motherboard. And as always, see you guys in the next one.